All right. Welcome back to TorqueChats. Hunter Stewart here with me again. I am Dylan James. And we're just going to jump into it. And basically, these are definitely less formal, less of an interview, more of a discussion. So I hope you guys enjoy. Today we're going to sort of talk about complexity and difficulty in tricking and how that shit changed a lot over the last decade. And even more so over the last 20 years. Now, Hunter and I have only actually experienced tricking firsthand for the last 10. So that's mostly where we're going to be talking about it from. But we're definitely going to have some say on what we've noticed from watching footage from earlier than we had started. Maybe more so me than you, because I watched a lot of old footage, especially recently.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But, so why don't we just start with, what was the level of difficulty when we came in 2010? What were, the hardest moves that you regularly saw? Because, triple cork was landed in 2009 for the first time by Scott Skelton. But it wasn't for another 5 or 6 years before there was numbers above 100 in the world that could do it. Because Rudy landed his in 2012.
Yeah.
At Neo. And he was number 23, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
In the order of, people in the world to ever land triple cork.
Yes.
And now, recently there was a post of someone asking, how many people in the world have landed triple cork? And it was well, we sort of stopped counting around 2015 or 16. And that was when it was well over the several hundreds. So for me, I was double cork was the difficulty level of that's what people were rising to, except for those few elite that step the people like Nick Fry, where it's just he's gonna go out and do a double back on the ground. He's just gonna set himself apart of the rest of everyone.
You know, that's, sorry, tangent, but one of the most influential samplers for me initially was that 2011 Nick Fry Winter sampler. One killer drum and bass song as the track. I can't remember what it is, but that sample was crazy. But I feel when I came in, it was it's very much dub. That's when dub was at its
that was pinnacle. The Spam Dubs era, was Spam 2009 to 2012.
And I was thinking about it, it was kind of you did double corks or you did dubs. I feel there wasn't a lot, there was a gap of sing dubs.
People were doing them, it just wasn't being talked about as it was part of the road to dub.
Yeah, it was very much a prerequisite to dub, not a trick.
Yeah, it wasn't something that people coveted. And that was also swing chains weren't as lengthy.
No, swing chains weren't really a thing. I think
there were a few people who could do them, I mean, Falou and Mike.
Yeah, the cork record was 16 in 2011.
Yeah, I mean, when I came in, Rudy was chasing...
Shout out the DeRuse.
Yeah, Rudy was chasing the most corks done in a minute, which was different from, consecutive cork swings, because that was,
Can we talk about that Guinness World Record video of Anise?
Yeah, no, that's why he did it. It was because it was...
How did that happen?
I don't know what, brought that about.
If anybody knows the context of that video and why that video exists...
I think it was just he could do a lot of corks and he could do them fast, and so
this was
just
before anybody ever knew what a cork was.
It wasn't that long ago. People knew what corks. It was a while ago, but people knew what corks were. At least people in the tricking and the martial arts scene, they had seen them enough. But Rudy was trying to break. I think the record was 17 or 18 or something like that. But that was do a single cork, land, pivot step into, or J step, using some setup to continue into the next one. And that was when I was like coming in 2010 and 11. Like Rudy could dub at that point, and like fairly well, but that was like a rare thing outside of the like really good trickers, you know. And like it was weird for me coming in because I was around constantly all of these people who were really good, and like I saw a bunch of things that they were doing, and it was just like, oh yeah, no, like all 5 of those people can do that same thing, not realizing that like they were the only 5 people on the East Coast that could do that thing.
Yeah.
And just like how that's shifted from like in 2011 going to gatherings, and then like the gatherings in like 2015, and like everybody's doing dub. There's like 7 triple corkers that are like can all land it on command, and like
Yeah, I think that was like a big moment for me of like going to my first Neo and being like, oh, this is like the caliber that like people are at, and that was like 2014.
I was gonna ask which one was it?
Yeah, was that Neo 2? 2014, right?
No, I think that was 3. Yeah, because it was 2012, and then that was Neo 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was 2012 was the first one, and then they skipped
a year.
2013, and then they've done every year since 2014.
Yeah.
Except for COVID.
Well, yeah. Yeah, and just being like, oh, like, all of the dubbers in America minus 2 or 3 are, like, here.
Yeah, that was definitely a realization that you would constantly have going to gatherings, like, 6-7 years ago, was like, holy shit, everyone who can do this, minus, like, 2 people from overseas, are in this room right now.
Yeah.
You know, or like just even as it like got to be more and more people that could do them, and like there was a couple hundred triple corkers, it was still this ridiculous thing when there was like 5 people that could do that like move that like 0.0000001% of the population is capable of. Like that's just insane. And, like, not only do they know each other, but they're friends, and they, like, traveled to hang out. Like...
Yeah, I think that's another thing of, like... I mean, we can go on and on about the, like... Oh, tricking's crazy. But, like... I don't go to... I go to sessions now expecting to see dubs and triples.
We should add the caveat that we're in Colorado, and we do recognize that, like, not everywhere has the, like, same scene and, like, access to training, so not everybody gets to walk in and see this, but it's definitely something that we encounter here going to the sessions.
Yeah, unless I'm going to session by myself, I expect to see dubs and triple corks that evening. Within the span of however many hours I'm there, I will see a dub and a triple cork unless I'm training by myself, which is wild.
Yeah. But that was like, and that's the other thing is like, it was just backswings, you know? It was plugged all the way in. It was still working, but there was audio maybe not getting recorded. Anyways, the swings, like it was just a swing in backswing, like swing cork. It wasn't until a few years later, because we're talking like 2010 is when we came in and like dubs were the thing. But it wasn't until like 2012 or 13 when people started doing even just single like swings in like different directions, like front swings, and starting to use some of these different stances. And it was really interesting the way that like there was a few pioneers that were leading the charge on certain movements and playing with weird stuff. people like Alex D, Ott, Velu, Mike, obviously. But they were just playing with movement in this different way, and they started doing tricks from weird
Volti?
Positions.
Sorry.
Yeah, definitely Volti. Like there's like way more than I just listed out. I was just like thinking of like the first people that I personally saw doing like front swings or like miss leg aerials and like just weird things. And it wasn't until a few years after we saw them doing it that we had like names to call it and like ways to reference what they were doing specifically. And that was when you started seeing other people who had been chasing the dubs and the triple corks before start playing with some of those things. And like definitely I see like Santana and you, like as soon as that door got opened, like that was where like you guys really exploded, because you were just like, oh, these stances and like landing in different ways, but then transitioning into different stances opens me up to like, I can get from any point A to any point B if I know the route, and like.
Yeah, I think the.
But that didn't exist in 2010 at first. Like it was like people were playing with those, but they didn't have names for it. So it was difficult to like, for that to propagate across the community, like it was only in the mind of the person who like saw the vision and the 2 or 3 people he could like get that vision over to.
I think that was a huge revelation for me, actually. Like that kind of like defined whatever my style is.
Technical. I would definitely define as like a creative technical.
The realization that you can put any 2 tricks next to each other, and there's a way to get between them, but
it's a problem.
The problem isn't the tricks themselves, it's how you go from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've been like, that was huge for me, and like just thinking of like, okay, so there's like basically 3 portions that I got to worry about. Like how I end the first trick, what I do in between, and how I start the second trick, and then putting myself within that context. Like, what do I want the end to look like? Or it was really like I would start with, what do I want the result to be, like the connected trick to be? What do I want it to look like?
Like shape of the combo sort of thing. Like
more
how
like,
does it look as I'm moving between this trick to the next trick? Is that what you mean, or different than that?
More like, let's say I wanted to do a corkscrew, but I wanted to do it from a 540 kick.
Okay.
Like when we came into tricking, and I think when most people come into tricking, you're like, okay, 540 kick and corkscrew. You would never...
Like, those things don't go together because the 540 lands on the right leg and the cork swings off the left leg.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I'm going to do a continuous movement off my right leg, because of the fact that a lot of tricks were, like, trying to maintain that, like, flow of, like, as this trick ends, I'm punching or popping or swinging, vanishing into the next one without any adjustment in between. And so the combos, they were fluid, but they were limited, by that. And so this opened that door.
Yeah, and that's where, like, somebody explained to me what a vanish was. I think it was Brian or... No. Somebody explained to me what a vanish was, and like natural progression is like you want to maintain that spin that you get from 540, so you'll want to skip, and then but you're changing your direction movement. Then it's like, okay, so like, but I want to keep going that way. Like that's where my 540 kick's going. How am I gonna 540 kick and then do a corkscrew, keep going that way? And that's where like vanish became like my thing. That I was like, oh, this is like my universal puzzle piece to put things together. And then I think we were talking about earlier, like my on a I think you guys can watch it on like the Torque Talk we did with Brian Skinner, where I'd fully interrupt the middle of the episode to go on a like 15-minute rant about what a boneless is. But then like playing with that idea of like, oh, so like I'm thinking about what I do between my tricks the same way I'm thinking about my tricks. So then like that being said, like this rule established that like a transition is just another trick, like why can't I do all the same things in my tricks that I can do in my transitions of like variations and different landing stances and doing all these cool things. And like that just opened up a world for me. I used to keep like all my tricking combos like just in notes, just sit there and like scroll through and be like, this trick and this trick would be very silly next to each other.
Right.
How what puzzle piece do I need to figure out to put in between? And that's like
Yeah. Basically, you give yourself a bunch of problems, and then you have to go and find the solution to those. It's like, what makes this true? This translating into this. What would make that possible?
Yeah.
You know, and then like manipulating on top of that to go, you know, okay, well that's one way, but like, are there more than one solution to this problem?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Like, how many roots does it have?
Which is the really funny thing about like whatever you want to call like creative tricking, of like tricking has always been like very like mathematical to me, or like very, I don't know, like this is a problem and I have to solve this problem.
Yep.
Where you look at somebody like Jordan and like I feel like his approach is more like I can visualize a shape that I want to see, and like how do I make that shape happen with how I move my body?
Yeah, no,
which is like the total like flip side of like problem solving or like imagination can both lead to this like cool place and like creative tricking and like making it like super complex and weird.
yeah, and so that's something that like I was talking to Jordan about the other day, and we'll probably cover in our podcast when we actually sit down and talk with each other, which should be coming out soon. But it was just like this idea that like the pioneers, they don't have the language for it, but they have this different thing that isn't really, it's an imagination like model that you can sort of play with and picture all of these things that don't have names, but just like, you know, like how to bend something or how to, you know, you can sort of remember what it felt like when you were doing a cork and like how you landed on the ground and where the momentum was and like what potentials can like paths you could take out of that. And that's what the pioneers tend to have, but they can just like immediately translate that into reality. Like how Jordan can suddenly do all of those new swings, which we'll get to that eventually. But yeah, just like all of these new things that like hadn't been thought of before, like a couple of days ago, the map is already there. Yeah. It doesn't need the terms, but there are other people who discover in more of like the technical math way where it's like, okay, give me the parameters with names, which the names are just pointers to a relationship of some type. And same with math. And that that relationship and how you can adjust it is, you know, what this trick, what transition in between it. And so when the pioneers can like have terminology to spread that outward, that's when you see like this wave of like, now there's tons and tons of people who understand these concepts and like can not only understand them conceptually, but like now they're starting to do them and like use them in their tricks widely, because it's like, oh, this model is understood and now I can like do something with it.
Yeah, exactly. I think
Pause.
Rip. They're standing by. We are standing by.
I'm so glad you're wearing it. Okay. And maybe I'll cut that out. Maybe you'll just stare at the wall. Who knows? As you were saying, Hunter.
Oh fuck, where was I at? Sorry. Camera, card, full. Now I lost my spot.
One day we'll figure out this like pause in the middle of the show problem, but like the camera wants to do what it wants to do. So complexity of tricking, maps, model,
yeah,
left, right brain.
Feels very much like a logic problem. Like if this is true and this is true, then what is this thing that must also be true?
Right.
Of like, I have a trick, I want to get to this trick. What is the thing in the middle that like makes that statement true? Which is
that's coming at it from like the analytic, like framework. Let's put things in boxes and draw. You know, I was using this analogy the other day when I was talking to Jordan about like the categories that we're placing on these tricks and like how they're coming together are more like lane lines in a pool. Mm-hmm. And like there is no lane 4. That is not a real construct. Like when you're in lane 4, you can operate within lane 4, but you could just as easily do a flip turn and find yourself in lane 3 or 6. You know, because they're surface level dividers. They don't actually penetrate into what like the tricking, you know, water of like potentials. So just because we're like cutting things up in particular ways and like calling something frontside or backside, we're just giving like references to this like potential of movement in space. Which is what tricking is exploring. But like when we give it names, then we can say, what has it done? What hasn't it done? Instead of just going, well, I think we got most of this, but like, I don't know, there's maybe a gap over there. I can't really tell because I didn't like check to like, I have no way to like mark that was done.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that like, you have to establish context and that like to create a relationship with a thing,
it has to be named.
It has to have context. And that's like what the naming system is. And that's like...
And that's any terminology. And this is something
for
that
anything.
Like, I really have like...
Like establishing that like 0.
Yeah, math.
Is like kind of hypocritical. It's kind of an oxymoron. Because we're like...
We're saying nothing, but we're ascribing... nothing as a name to...
Yeah, we're giving context in
empty,
a thing...
which is also
to
a word,
lack of things.
Yeah.
Which is a very funny thing to think about. But, like, with... Like, you can't have anything without context, or we can't understand anything without context.
You have to start somewhere to be able to build up the framework. And that's, like, what tricking terminology and, you know, ultimately all terminologies are. I was listening to a book about, you know, classical physics recently, and one of the things he mentioned was, you know, when he was, you know, developing the system of naming, you know, the particles in an atom, positive and negative, the author of the book just mentions, he's like, and it's important to note that he just as easily could have called them chocolate and strawberry. Like, the names are arbitrary. They don't actually have any, like, specific reference. It's just like, I'm going to call this, and I'm going to call this, that. That way we can start to talk about, okay, this moves around this one. You know, and that's the same thing with like tricking, but that's also, it's interesting how in a lot of fields, they have to start with the naming system, and then they can like discover the things and then bring them into reality. In tricking, it seems a lot of the time to happen opposite. And
I think that comes from a lack of vocabulary.
Right. It's like we
don't have all the tools yet.
Yeah, we hadn't mapped all of those models out yet, and so the people who are discovering the new thing, they just sort of like throw a label on it, which is probably why tricking as a naming system, it's, well, how do we say this nicely? It's fucking broken. And it's like, mostly because there's a lot of like, what's the word?
Slang?
No, things that are like held on from the past. You know the like biology term.
Archaic? I don't know.
Whenever we upgrade the system, there are certain things that get brought along with it. Hyper as a term is one of those things where it used to mean a lot of different things, and it still does mean a lot of different things to different people.
Yeah.
And like, I have like multiple different uses within different contexts where that would make sense to me. But we should, like, there's a better way, and like, if we can start like laying that out a little bit more to where like the naming system isn't contradicting itself constantly, it's going to make the logic problems for the next generation to come in a lot easier to parse out, because they're not going to go, is that an S or is that a C and a backwards C where they're over, you know what I mean? Like where there's this like gray area where it's like that's something different, but it has the same name and it looks like the same symbol, but it's not.
I compare it to like, you think about like physics and stuff, like that it's we're discovering that, like, for me, like tricking discovery was like, you know, if this then this must be true, is like something like physics has all the language to establish the two premises, and then find the connecting factor that like makes them true, of like, well, we know general relativity is a thing and quantum physics are a thing, but then like giving that context of like, well, this is true, why are they both? And that like that's where the language I think is necessary, like being able to establish premises to then work within.
Because once people can start like specifically referencing like, oh, this person in the sampler, they did this trick landing in this stance, and like if you land in that stance, these are the things you could do out of it, sort of thing, that like that conversation allows for someone who maybe hadn't thought of those things before to start engaging with them. And we lost audio. One day maybe we'll upgrade the camera. It's old.
But
like, so with all of that terminology, the goal is not to just like rigorously label everything just for the sake of labeling it. It's more for the sake of like, let's map out the things that we haven't explored, and then that this is like a new starting point. You know, it's like, oh, we've looked at all of this, cool. People can continue playing with all of those things as much as they want, but like, what's this new thing? What do we call that? And like, go explore this area. Can we do, you know, like if we're talking about like, and let's not get too much into like the new swings, but like if we're talking about like a new transition of some type, like what ways can that be applied? You know, when does it work? When does it break? You know, how far can you push this? You know,
I think like use the TKT mainstream argument of like creating a naming system and like naming things and like getting specific is never for, I shouldn't say never, is rarely for practical application. It's mostly for theoretical application.
Right.
Which is why...
Because the real world is messier and more nuanced, and the lines aren't as, like...
And, you know, it's convenient to just say, you know, 540 kick instead of, like, tornado to backside hyper. You know?
Right. Right. Or...
cheat 180 round hyper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's, like, one of those things of, like, we all know that, like, that is a thing. Like, that is a 540 kick. But then we, like, break it down so we can analyze its parts and then manipulate it.
Yeah. Like, the parameters become the building blocks.
Exactly. And that's, I think, I don't want to say, for the risk of sounding pretentious, that's where I feel like the mainstream argument was short-sighted.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. Like, I totally understand.
Say that as somebody that almost actively avoids speaking in TKT now.
Oh, really?
It's a lot. It's a lot of words to say. I don't have the energy to say all those words.
Yeah.
I barely have the energy to do the tricks.
That's fair. Yeah. I definitely flop between them, and for that exact reason is, like, usually it's easier just to say, like, swing 9, even though there's no fucking 900 in that. But, like, for the sake of, like, when you want to go and look at the analysis, breaking it down into, like, the cheat and the 540 and the round and, like, how all of that, like, the cheat adding the 180 to make it the 720 round, like, how that happens on the ground, and, like, you're actually moving from, you know, front side stance into backside for the takeoff, and, like, those things are valuable as, like, oh, now if I just train this particular subset of movements, I can get better at that and then put it into the whole context of doing the actual trick. And then when you put it into the combo, it doesn't matter what you reference it as long as, like you don't even have to call it anything. Like, if you just do the tricking combo and show it to someone else that appreciates tricking, like, they don't need to label it either. They can just watch it and, like, they'll like might make some, like, mental, like, oh, this is what that was, this is what that was. But that's just, like, categorizing for themselves to, like, remember the combo later.
Yeah, I think part of it is also just, like, you know, there is something to be said about, like, establishing legitimacy through the language you use.
Right.
Of, like...
But that's, like, when you have a specific goal in mind with criteria, and you're saying, okay, I want to meet this criteria. Did I meet that criteria?
Exactly.
Sort of thing. Versus, like, there's this other side of tricking that isn't just, like, doing a list of tricks. That is, like, what tricking really is, which is this sort of response to movement and falling through the air. And, like, sometimes you don't do the specific trick that you had planned. And, like, how do you react to that in, real time? Like, oh, I landed right foot instead of left foot. Well, I want to keep going, so I'll just, like, aerial into something, like, some other chain that I know, and, like, that sort of reactionary, like, there's no, like, planning and, like, labeling all of those things in that.
Yeah.
But, like, the other, like, when you do have, like, I want to see this plus this plus this plus this in one chain, that's where it really excels. Because it's like, now we have criteria for me to look at my friend who's outside of me and go, did I do it?
Yeah. And
then he can be like, nah, you needed to, like, rotate a little bit more and get your kick coming out like that for what you said you wanted to do.
Yeah. The age-old, you did it, but you're not going to like it when you see it.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's there.
The
amount of times I've said that.
Someone would call it a snafu. Some would call it a snafu.
I would call it a 540 gyro, but that's just me.
Yeah, exactly. I think, there's fun to be had with both things of like, there's discovery, and then there's also like just being, which is like, just existing in the world of tricks is like, and like existing in the tricks is very cool, and like the different interactions you can have with that, of like
Well,
creating creative problem solving versus like imagination or whatever that is like your thing that you're using tricking to realize is like,
yes,
and obviously there's a bunch of other ways that you like use tricking to realize those feelings, but
I think a lot of the times everyone in their tricking journey starts with this, like, at the very beginning, okay, there's this trick that I saw that was cool that I wanted to land.
Yeah.
And that's the criteria that I've set as like what I'm trying to achieve. I'm going to like attempt to go and do that thing. And then what happens is like you get smacked with this reality of movement is different and you fall through the air different than you do in your imagination. And so like sometimes out of those failures, you end up exploring these weird new movements that you didn't set out to. But like maybe they've been named, maybe they haven't.
Yeah.
But like your encounter with them is this like exploration and like accidental like stumbling upon, instead of like having a map with a destination where you're like constantly checking like signposts going, oh yeah, no, they said like go past the apple tree and then turn left, and so that's the apple tree, so I'm going left. Yeah, it's like this is like someone who's just like, I'm just going on a walk through the wilderness and we'll see what we find, and like, oh look at that, There's a little oasis over there with a waterfall. I wasn't expecting that, but that's here. I'm going to go hang out by that.
Yeah.
And now I know how to get there. So next time I could get there. I can maybe show some other people how to get there.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about new swings?
Not in this one. I want the graphics ready.
Okay. Maybe we'll have Jordan make a little like teaser.
Oh no, I definitely we got plans.
We keep alluding to a thing. And these are probably things that have been done before, but putting names to them and establishing terminology. And by we, I mean Dylan.
It's a group of, there's a number of people that I've been talking to and like discussing like some new things that I saw. And hopefully
but playing off that idea of like, okay, we established all of these things that are true about tricking and like
if this
all
then
of our
that.
tools, but like if I can take off for an A-twist from like my normal A-twist setup off of my left leg, why can't I take off for an A-twist off of my right leg, just in the same, keeping every other variable same, like just change your leg, like, oh, well that makes it like a new thing. And like just that idea of like, well,
just playing with things in ways that
tweaking parameters.
Yeah, and that is happening in the theory, but then there's also the raw exploration of like a couple of people had already done some of these like movements in certain ways that like they just hadn't been labeled, and like there are the difficulty in tricking, while it feels like it has reached its top, as far as like, well, maybe not like to the people who get it, but like to some people coming in, they might look at this and be like, yo, we've mapped most of it, like there's definitely not that much more. And I think the thing is like we're sort of just now breaking into the next renaissance where there's going to be this wave of people playing with new things, because like there have been some exploration leaders over the last several years that have just been weird movers, and them playing with things just needs names. The same way that like the people playing with swings, front swings and like the Four Seasons combos a decade ago, like they needed names so that would propagate outwards, and like these new concepts just need the same thing. And then a lot more people will be able to start thinking, maybe not to the full degree, but like they'll start being able to see the way that like Jordan and Omid and like you and Santana, like people play with tricks. And like it's interesting because like you definitely come at it from the logic side of like playing with the technicals, whereas Jordan completely comes at it from the creative, well, this is just energy moving through space and time and it makes shapes and I'm shapes.
Yeah.
And like that's like that process, like the breaking down of all of the barriers can do the same end purpose as building up a bunch of boxes around things and giving them names and labels. Exactly. It's like you can both sides of those actually come together in this beautiful unison that is just creativity.
Exactly. It's a cool thing of like thinking about like logical. I feel like we denote logic as being uncreative, but there's creative problem solving within it. It's just not expressed the same.
I think the issue that a lot of people see with like logic not being creative is there are certain systems that refuse to break outside themselves.
Yes.
And they become stale and stagnant because they're not reifying and like re-encountering reality and like checking. It's like, oh, well, this is the way it used to be. And that just continues for time. It's like, well, that's what we called it. Well, that's what it is. Instead of this constant questioning of, but is it that? Or like, but what if we add this? And so, like, I've always sort of said, like, one of the sort of, if tricking had like a list of rules, like the first rule is we have rules, break them.
Yeah.
Like every parameter that was set out, every like you can, twisting typically like you twist in one direction and you cartwheel in that direction that you twist and you swing with your strong leg and like these like certain like things that used to be rules a long time ago, like they were never written or spoken, but it was just sort of like people when they came into it, it was like, okay, that's the limit. Got it. The first rule is like, that limit is imaginary. You can do anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you see a cool movement over there, add it. That's not tricking. Add it. Like if something is not tricking, make it tricking sort of thing. As far as like movement and body shapes and manipulations of that concept.
That is definitely something that like,
I feel like most people would agree with like some version of that rule of like tricking has rules, break them is like commandment 1.
Yeah, which is like kind of like the corny like I just imagine a Facebook post of somebody who's very new to tricking posting that, but like that's the real shit of like no. This is corny because it's very, very true. And like this is how you must operate within the system. Yeah.
It's like a lot of the arguments that happen around terminology and specifics on, like in the online community. First off, that doesn't happen as much in the way it does online. When you get into reality, people are much more like trying to discover like, well, what is the real thing, instead of saying like, well, I'm right and I'm right. That's typically what you see online. usually it's in person and like at a gathering. It's like, well, what'd you do? I did this. No, you didn't. Well, this is why I think it's this. Well, this is why I think it's not. And it's basically like two people like
collaborative.
like yeah, collaborating and like trying to discover like, well, what was it what was the thing that you actually did? And sometimes it was, oh, well, that was just this and you just did it weird. But other times it's, yo, no, that was new. I haven't. Let's go check with other people and see if they have seen this before, because I've never seen this particular thing before.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing of like,
Dirt in my hair.
very much don't like participating in the online tricking community because I'm bombarded with social media. Yeah.
Tastes bad.
Yeah.
Leaves a bad taste in your mouth from time to time.
Yeah. I'm exhausted all the time. It's energy draining. But the collaborative effort of trying to figure out what the fuck we're doing is kind of like one of the big things about like gatherings or tricking sessions or whatever. Is like, all right, we're doing a thing. Not really. We don't know what this thing that we're participating in is. I guess we have to figure that out together.
Yeah,
because we're both doing it.
Yeah, this sort of co-discovery where it's like one person gives a little bit and sees it from their perspective, and another person gives a little bit and sees it from their perspective, and like exactly what we were doing out there when you came over and we were like, hey, we got a new thing. Check this out. And then you were like, holy shit. Okay, so oh my god. And then if you, okay, fuck. Oh, yeah, okay, yes, this is cool. Okay, let me try this, and I'm gonna try this, and like there's just like this giddiness and excitedness that like everyone in the vicinity feels.
I was saying to you earlier of like, oh, I haven't been like excited about tricks like this in such a long time. And one of the big things is like, not saying that I have, but like to the extent that I know of, like I've thought about basically every parameter that I can have and found a general solution to that problem. Not saying that I've done the trick, but basically everything I was like, oh,
if I wanted
this is probably where that would work. And Dylan fully gave me new parameters to work within earlier, and I was like, oh my god, I guess I have to train hard again.
I gotta try new things. Yeah.
This is a very new thing for me. And I, very much the, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Until you suddenly are confronted with it, and then it's like this, like, there's this, like, expansion of, like, potential that you just see as, like we were talking about, it's like when you leave the map in, like, Tony Hawk or something, like, when you get to, like, the out-of-bounds zone, it's like, there's no map, but for some reason, the game isn't crashing and you can move around.
Yeah. It felt very much like, new skill tree. Like, you didn't, like, you leveled up and you're like, oh, I think I capped it out, and then, like, you leveled up something else, and then, like, new skills popped out on this skill tree, and you're like, oh shit, dope. That was cool. That was very cool for me. Yeah, I hope we teased everybody enough with what Dylan's working on and, like, establishing new names for things. So
I'm just trying to
update
the system as best as I can with, like, the 10 years of knowledge that I now have, because like when I was, you know, helping with the graphics for Trick Theory, I was still, like, pretty fresh on some of those ideas. Like, I'd only known about them for a year or two. And so, like, I understood them, but, like, not to the extent that, like, I've played with them over the last 8 years, you know, or when was 7 years.
Yes.
But going back to like the main topic, and then we'll probably wrap it up here soon. Just like how fast tricking went from only being, you know, particular like limits. It was like you have like this circle, and you know what? I'm just gonna like do a graphic on this. So you have this circle, and as the like probably somewhere over in this area, as that new bubble expands, it creates a bubble around everything that hasn't been mapped. So like we map this new little bump, and then it opens up the realization for everyone who's like in tricking or in any domain to like start exploring those other areas. And usually that first happens as seeing someone do some crazy movement, and we don't have a name for it, but then a couple of people like frame by frame it and figure out how to move in that way, which is how trickers used to learn, is just single clip, one trick, frame by frame. Okay, he moves his leg like this, then like this, then like, oh, okay, that's when he jumps. Okay, now I'll like try and do that. And, you know, it's the same progression. That happens slower than if we have a bunch of labels and ways of breaking it down and saying, oh, no, he put this plus this plus this plus this, and that made the new thing, and we're calling the new thing, which is this expansion, we'll call that this, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to call that shurikane. If you know what a shurikane is, you could break that into, like, it's expansion, you know, of, like, all of the pieces that make that trick up. But you don't need to, because, like, you can also just point to the movement of shurikane.
Yeah, exactly.
But we wouldn't have gotten to that point if we didn't have those parameters of like people starting to go, okay, well this is a shuriken, well this is a hyperhook, this is a gyro, and this is you could do more than one kick of the same kick within a single trick, double kicks. And okay, well what if let's just put these together in a weird way. What if we did that too? And like we'll invert it, do the cork with a shuriken, and then gyro it with an extra kick coming around, and like all of those pieces combining together is actually how a lot of people can like figure out how to fucking do the thing that they saw that was like, oh my god, what the fuck was that?
Yeah, while also acknowledging that like there is a natural progression of like the like add one more thing, you know?
Yes.
It's an interesting balance between like basically like original conception and, or I guess I shouldn't say original conception, maybe
Discovery.
non-influenced conception.
Everything is influenced. See, like that's the thing, is like the main thing that actually gets us to do anything is like we see something and we go, that was neat. Like, I'm pretty sure the first person to do a hurricane kick did it, and someone in the community, I want to say like Sesh or Will Conies or someone can like verify this, but that straight up came from like people were watching Street Fighter and went, yo, I could fucking do that.
Yeah.
Well, like, there are certain movements where it was just like, I got inspired by this, or like I watched Ninja Turtles, I watched this movie, and it was like, I'm gonna move like that.
Yeah, well, I think
or I watched Omid move this way, and now I'm gonna try that weird shit.
That is more common than somebody thinking about like, well, I have all these pieces. I guess they go together like that. That must be a thing.
Right, yeah. It's less people, like, sitting there with the parameters, like I have been for the last, like, month, and just going, if you move this one here, no, okay, that doesn't work. But if you move, no, that
Yeah,
still doesn't
yeah,
work.
yeah.
Oh! I got one. Is this one? Is this one? And then like showing it to people, like, yo, I think this is a thing. Is this a thing?
Yes.
And then other people going, holy shit, that's a thing.
Yeah. It's very fun thing to play with.
Yeah.
It's fun when you know things that you can just. Now you have so many more toys to play with.
Exactly.
And fun fact, all your toys are compatible.
Yes.
Even though they're from different brands.
Yep. Everything has like the perfect like Lego insertion of like this snaps together. You can attach this to this to this to this. It's you know how like fucking the Transformers.
Yeah.
You know, like they're all separately their own thing, and then like it's like this is a thing, this is a thing, this is a thing, but then it's like Autobots assemble, and they all come together, and they become like Mechazoid and all of these dope like.
I think you're thinking of Power Rangers, but yes.
I was crossing the two of them with the name. I meant no. What is it called when they all come together? Because they do.
Megazord. That's Power Rangers.
No. Transformers. What's it called? What? Don't they come?
No.
Am I misremembering movies?
Yep.
I don't watch a lot of pop culture movies. I'm mostly
You're
just a
thinking
nerd.
of Power Rangers.
I'm mostly just a nerd who like reads science books and shit.
You're thinking of Power Rangers.
Probably. But regardless, it's like all of the separate pieces come together, and like they can operate separately as they're separate pieces, but when they come together, it's like this powerhouse of like potential. And like that is like the new trick that gets made of like hodgepodging all of these things together.
Yes. It's
I'm gonna have to go look that shit up. That's gonna bother me.
We've only scratched the surface for what tricks there are to do. Just crazy.
Yeah. But just like the rapidness that everything has complexified, like how fast everything like went from like just gainers, just like some basic kicks, like the cork was like a swing B-twist sort of a thing where there was no inversion, and you know now it's just like there's so much that like there was a time there was a point in time within tricking when you could write down every trick that we knew of. You could write all of them down and it wouldn't be impossible. We are at a point now where you could, but you would never attempt to list out each individual trick. And I know this from firsthand experience because I literally fucking tried. I started and I realized somewhere where my Illustrator file was starting to like lag and crash a little bit because I had so many individual text boxes and like columns and categories. And that was just adding rotation to the base flips. And that was not including the new shit that we found. And so like that was just like one thing, and the realization that like every single variation on top of the rotation changes it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's a wild thing to think about, but I think that might be a good place to call it. Yeah, TorqueTricking. You're here. You're watching this. Do the things with the things.
Yeah, so definitely we will be continuing to talk about like things like this in the future at even more length, because there's a lot to discuss here, but it's probably a good time to wrap it up.
If you have a topic about tricking that you'd like to hear thoughts about, doesn't have to be about like tricks themselves, just like anything remotely related to tricking, we'd love to talk about it. So
yeah, check us out on TorqueTricking.com. Buy a shirt, send some love. We definitely have, I've got a lot in the works. Torque has a lot in the works, like project-wise. Hopefully that the community will like benefit from. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll see you next time.